Honey is perhaps the sweetener that generates the most emotional conflict in people with diabetes, because it is natural, because it carries millennia of medicinal tradition, because it has flavor and emotional memory that refined sugar will never have. And at the same time, every diabetes manual says to avoid it because it's sugar. The truth about honey and diabetes is more nuanced than can or can't. It depends on which honey, in what quantity, in what context, at what time of day, and compared to what. Today I will show you the 7 ways to use honey with the lowest glycemic impact, and when honey can or cannot be part of the diet of someone with diabetes. Before the 7 ways, the honesty you deserve about honey and blood glucose. Honey raises blood sugar. This is not negotiable. It is physiology. Honey is composed of approximately 80% sugars, primarily fructose and glucose. The glycemic index of raw honey ranges from 32 to 65, depending on variety and fructose to glucose ratio. Honey with higher fructose proportion has lower GI because fructose is metabolized primarily by the liver without direct insulin stimulation. Table sugar has GI of 65. Certain raw honey varieties have significantly lower GI than sugar. Not that they don't raise blood glucose, but that they raise it less and more slowly. Raw honey has over 200 identified compounds, including polyphenols, flavonoids, phenolic acids, enzymes, vitamins, and minerals. The correct comparison is not honey versus nothing. It is honey versus refined sugar or other sweeteners. In that comparison, quality raw honey can be the option with the lowest glycemic impact and highest nutritional value among natural caloric sweeteners. Way number 1. Industrial honey versus raw honey. The distinction that determines everything. Industrial honey, pasteurized, filtered, frequently heated to temperatures that destroy enzymes and polyphenols, is biochemically a different product from raw honey. Heating above 40 degrees Celsius inactivates the enzymes present in raw honey and degrades a significant portion of polyphenols and flavonoids. Studies in the Journal of Apicultural Research show raw honey has antioxidant activity, on average 4.3 times greater than processed honey. A clinical trial in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, raw honey produced 32% lower glycemic peak than pasteurized honey. Practical message: supermarket pasteurized honey does not have the bioactive compounds that differentiate honey from sugar. Raw honey tends to crystallize over time. Positive sign it was not artificially heated. Way number 2. Raw honey as a substitute for refined sugar. Replacing refined sugar with quality raw honey. In 20 to 30% smaller quantity, honey is sweeter by weight, produces lower glycemic impact through 3 factors. Average GI of high-quality raw honey is 32 to 55 versus 65 for sugar. Fructose in honey follows a different metabolic pathway. Honey polyphenols partially inhibit digestive enzymes that break down sugars. A clinical trial in the Iranian Journal of Basic Medical Sciences, replacing sugar with raw honey in type 2 diabetes adults for 8 weeks, produced 0.17% HbA1c reduction and improvement in inflammatory markers. Quantity is fundamental. Maximum 25 grams per day. Patricia, 64, a retired homemaker from Phoenix, switching a teaspoon of sugar to raw honey in breakfast. Post-breakfast glucose peak fell from 148 to 131 milligrams per deciliter on average. Way number 3. Manuka honey as honey with unique bioactive properties. Manuka honey has methyl glyoxal, MGO, concentrations 100 to 1,000 times greater than other honeys. MGO may activate AMPK receptors in muscle cells, same mechanism as metformin, and has partial intestinal alpha-glucosidase inhibition effect. A study in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry, Manuka honey with UMF certification above 10 had 28% inhibitory effect on intestinal alpha-glucosidase in vitro. Manuka typically has GI between 32 and 45. Honesty note: studies with Manuka and diabetes are still preliminary. For someone with diabetes wanting to use honey occasionally, Manuka UMF10+ has the most favorable documented profile. Frank, 68, retired from Cleveland, switching from common honey to Manuka UMF15. Glucose, 90 minutes after tea, fell from 162 to 138 milligrams per deciliter. Way number 4, honey consumed after protein and fat, never fasting. When honey is consumed fasting, sugars are absorbed directly without any retarding factor. When consumed after a meal with protein and fat, gastric emptying is significantly delayed. A food sequence study in the Journal of Nutrition, adding sugars after protein and fat versus before reduced glycemic peak by 37%. Practical application: use honey over plain Greek yogurt. Blend it into a smoothie with milk or protein. Sweeten coffee that accompanies eggs, never in hot water as the first intake of the day. Margaret, 66, retired teacher from Phoenix, changing fasting honey and water to honey over Greek yogurt after a complete breakfast. Glucose 90 minutes later fell from 189 to 142 milligrams per deciliter with the same amount of honey. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from. And if not yet subscribed, click the button and turn on the bell. Way number 5, honey combined with cinnamon. Cinnamon contains specific polyphenols, especially type A proanthocyanidin, that mimic insulin action in muscle cells by activating GLUT4 receptors, increasing glucose uptake independently of insulin. They also partially inhibit intestinal alpha-glucosidase. A study in the Journal of Medicinal Food. Honey plus cinnamon versus honey alone versus sucrose in adults with prediabetes. The honey plus cinnamon combination produced a glycemic peak 21% lower than honey alone and 44% lower than equivalent sucrose. Practical preparation: mix raw honey with Ceylon cinnamon powder over yogurt, in tea, or in culinary preparations. Richard, 67, retired engineer from Cleveland. Honey with cinnamon in morning yogurt. Average post-breakfast glucose fell from 158 to 129 milligrams per deciliter. Way number 6, honey with propolis. Propolis contains CAPE, caffeic acid phenylethyl ester, which activates PPAR gamma receptors in fat and muscle cells, improving insulin sensitivity. A clinical trial in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. Propolis extract in type 2 diabetes adults for 12 weeks reduced HbA1c by 0.28% and inflammatory markers. CAPE also inhibits NF-κB with documented protective effect on pancreatic beta cells, potentially slowing type 2 diabetes progression. Precaution: propolis can cause allergic reactions in people with B product allergy. Patricia, grandmother, 70, retired from Atlanta. Honey with propolis occasionally in afternoon tea. CRP reduced from 3.8 to 2.1 milligrams per liter after 14 weeks. Way number 7, honey in the right context and portion, the complete framework. 5 elements: correct honey type, raw, single flower with high fructose proportion. Acacia, Manuka, orange blossom have lower GI than polyfloral, never pasteurized. Correct portion: maximum 1 teaspoon, 7 to 10 grams, per episode, maximum 2 episodes per day. Correct timing: never fasting, always after other foods, especially protein and fat. Correct dietary context: always combined with absorption-slowing foods. Correct frequency: honey is not for unrestricted daily use, only as sugar substitute within a controlled carbohydrate diet. A systematic review in Nutrients, 2021, analyzing 18 clinical trials with honey in people with diabetes or increased risk. Raw honey in doses of 5 to 25 grams per day as refined sugar substitute was associated with improved lipid profile, reduced inflammatory markers, and lower glycemic impact than sugar in 14 of 18 studies. In 4 studies, honey produced similar or higher glycemic elevation than sugar, in those where it was used in higher doses, fasting, or without adequate dietary context. This video is not permission to eat honey without restriction. It is not a claim that honey lowers blood sugar. Honey raises blood sugar with a more favorable profile than refined sugar under the right conditions. Raw honey, quality, in small doses, in the correct dietary context, can be used occasionally by people with well-controlled type 2 diabetes as a refined sugar substitute with lower glycemic impact, higher nutritional value, and documented anti-inflammatory benefits compared to sugar. Practical plan: use only raw honey, maximum 1 teaspoon over yogurt or with protein, never fasting. Measure glucose 90 minutes after. Observe individual response, add cinnamon, use Manuka if available. The glucometer is the most honest personal validator. God bless you and give you much health. Until next time. Why acacia honey has the lowest GI among common honeys? Acacia honey, produced from the nectar of acacia or black locust flowers, has an exceptional composition, approximately 70 to 85% fructose and only 20 to 30% glucose, compared to the typical 50-50 split in most honeys. Since fructose has a GY of 19 while glucose has a GI of 100, this composition gives acacia honey an exceptionally low GI, typically between 32 and 40. For a diabetic wanting to use honey occasionally, raw acacia honey is the option with the lowest glycemic impact after Manuka, with the additional advantage of remaining liquid longer without crystallizing, making exact measurement in small doses easier. The CAPE mechanism from propolis and beta cell protection. CAPE, caffeic acid phenylethyl ester, is a potent NF-κB inhibitor, the central transcription factor of inflammation. In the diabetes context, chronic low-grade inflammation activates NF-κB in pancreatic beta cells, accelerating their apoptosis. With fewer functional beta cells, less insulin is produced. CAPE, by inhibiting NF-κB, has documented protective effect on beta cells, potentially slowing type 2 diabetes progression. This is one of the pathways through which propolis integrated with honey may offer benefit beyond the honey itself, not glycemic, but beta cell preservation. Glycemic index versus glycemic load. The distinction that matters most for honey. A teaspoon of raw honey, 7 grams, contains only 5 to 6 grams of available carbohydrates. The glycemic load of that portion is low regardless of GLY, comparable to half a small apple. The problem with honey becoming dangerous for diabetics is not the GI of honey, but the dose. When 3 to 4 tablespoons are used in tea, the glycemic load becomes significant. With small doses and the right context, even moderately, GI honey is manageable. The glucometer as the most honest personal validator. The most revealing experiment. 2 different days, the same amount of raw honey. Day 1. Honey in hot water fasting. Day 2. Honey over Greek yogurt after a complete breakfast with eggs. Measure blood glucose before and 90 minutes after on both occasions. The difference of 30 to 50 points in the 90-minute reading is the most convincing personal proof that context, not just the honey, determines the glycemic outcome. 7 ways. A smarter relationship with honey and diabetes. Better glycemic control without giving up the sweetness that connects to tradition and pleasure. The science is honest about what honey is. The context determines what honey does. God bless you and give you much health. Until next time, 5 key takeaways. 1. Honey raises blood sugar. It does not lower it, but raises it more slowly and with a better profile than refined sugar when raw and in the right context. 2. Industrialized, pasteurized. Honey loses most of its advantages over sugar. Use only raw, unpasteurized honey. 3. Never fasting, always after protein and fat. Context reduces glycemic peak by 30 to 40%. 4. Cinnamon added to honey further reduces glycemic peak by 21% compared to honey alone. 5. The glucometer is the most honest personal validator. Measure blood glucose 90 minutes after each use. How to read honey labels to verify quality. To ensure buying quality raw honey, look for raw or unpasteurized on the label. Crystallization is a positive sign. Raw honey crystallizes naturally because it has not been artificially heated. Prefer single flower, monofloral, over multifloral honey. Composition is more predictable and GI more consistent. Prefer local producers or direct beekeepers. For lowest GI, raw acacia. Honey typically GI 32 to 40. Manuka UMF 10 plus GI 35 to 45. Raw orange blossom. Honey GI 40 to 50. Raw polyfloral honey variable, GI 45 to 65, depending on origin. The systematic review evidence for honey in diabetes management. The nutrients. 2021 systematic review analyzed 18 clinical trials involving honey in people with diabetes or increased risk. The conclusion: raw honey in doses of 5 to 25 grams per day as a refined sugar substitute was associated with improved lipid profile, reduced inflammatory markers, and lower glycemic impact than sugar in 14 of 18 studies. The 4 studies where honey performed similarly or worse than sugar were those using it in higher doses, fasting, or without adequate dietary context. This confirms dose, timing, and context are the critical variables. The honey itself is not inherently good or bad for diabetes. How it is used determines the outcome. A final reflection on seeking natural sweetness in the diabetic's diet. Diabetes does not have to mean the end of sweetness. It means learning to manage sweetness with intelligence. Raw honey, with its 200 bioactive compounds, its lower glycemic index compared to sugar, and its documented anti-inflammatory properties, offers a way to maintain sweetness in the diet more consciously and with a better metabolic profile than refined sugar. It is not a perfect solution, but it is genuinely better than sugar within the category of natural caloric sweeteners. With that honest understanding, honey has a legitimate, limited, and monitored place in the life of someone with diabetes. 7 ways. A life with diabetes that is sweeter, with intelligence and science. God bless you and give you much health. Until next time. The cultural and psychological dimension of honey in diabetes. Honey occupies a special psychological and cultural place. From ancient medicine to grandmother's remedies, from religious texts, honey is mentioned in the Quran, the Bible, Ayurvedic medicine, and traditional Chinese medicine, to the morning ritual of tea with honey. When someone receives a diabetes diagnosis and is told to avoid honey, it is not just a dietary restriction, it is a disruption of cultural practices and comforting rituals. The scientific nuance presented in this video, that raw honey, in the right dose and context, can be part of a diabetes-friendly diet, is not just metabolically relevant, it is psychologically and culturally significant. People with diabetes who can adapt rather than eliminate their relationship with traditional foods are more likely to sustain their dietary changes long-term. About Manuka honey's unique biochemistry. Manuka honey's unusual concentration of methyl glyoxal, MgO, gives it properties that other honeys do not have. MgO forms stable complexes with proteins and DNA through a reaction called glycation, ironically the same process that causes complications in diabetes. But within the acidic environment of the digestive system, MgO has documented antimicrobial activity against a wide range of pathogens. The relevance to diabetes. People with diabetes have significantly higher rates of infections and slower wound healing, partly due to compromised immune function. Manuka honey's documented antimicrobial properties offer a secondary benefit beyond glycemic profile for this population. The specific certification systems, UMF, Unique Manuka Factor, and MgO ratings, provide verified concentrations of the active compounds. UMF 10 plus corresponds to approximately 263 plus milligrams per kilogram of MgO, UMF 15 plus to 514 plus milligrams per kilogram, UMF 20 plus to 829 plus milligrams per kilogram. Higher certification means more bioactive compounds, and for diabetes purposes, better glycemic profile and more documented anti-inflammatory effect. The honest case for raw honey as the best sweetener option for diabetics. The question is not whether honey is medicine for diabetes. It clearly is not. The question is, among natural caloric sweeteners, which has the least harmful profile for someone with diabetes? The answer, based on the available evidence, raw honey, especially varieties with high fructose content like acacia or manuka, used in small doses after protein and fat, with cinnamon. Raw honey beats refined sugar on glycemic index, nutritional value, anti-inflammatory content, and beta cell protection through propolis. It beats agave syrup, which is high in fructose but lacks bioactive compounds. It beats artificial sweeteners in terms of whole food naturalness and absence of gut microbiome disruption concerns. Within the category of sweeteners that still belong in a diabetes diet occasionally, raw honey in the right context is the most defensible choice. 7 ways to make that context work for you. God bless you and give you much health. Until next time. Practical summary. Raw honey is not medicine for diabetes. It is the natural caloric sweetener with the best profile available for someone who must manage sugar. In doses of 5 to 25 grams per day as a substitute for refined sugar consumed after protein and fat, combined with cinnamon and monitored with a glucometer, raw honey can coexist with diabetes management. Outside these conditions, fasting in large amounts without dietary context, its glycemic impact can be comparable to or greater than refined sugar. The key is precision, the right type, the right dose, the right timing, the right context. 7 ways. A more scientific and more honest approach to honey and diabetes. The science is honest about what honey is and is not. Your glucometer will confirm which context works best for your individual physiology. God bless you and give you much health. Until next time, with more evidence-based tips for living better with diabetes. The Research Foundation, Systematic Review Evidence. The Nutrients, 2021 Systematic Review, 18 clinical trials, people with diabetes or increased risk, found raw honey in 5 to 25 gram daily doses as a refined sugar substitute associated with improved lipid profiles, reduced inflammatory markers, and lower glycemic impact than sugar in 14 of 18 studies. The 4 studies where honey performed worse were those using higher doses, fasting timing, or without adequate dietary context. This is the evidence foundation. Honey's effects are context-dependent. The same food that modestly improves glycemic response in one context produces significant spikes in another. The 7 ways in this video are precisely the conditions under which honey performs best, not as a diabetes treatment, but as the most metabolically favorable natural sweetener available when sweetness must be part of the diet. Use this framework, test it with your glucometer, and adapt to your individual response. Every person with diabetes responds slightly differently to honey because the specific composition of the honey, residual beta cell function, and complete dietary context are all variables. The glucometer tells the truth. God bless you. 7 ways to use honey with the lowest glycemic impact. An honest relationship with sweetness and diabetes. God bless you and give you much health. Until next time. Note on honey allergies and precautions. A small percentage of people are allergic to honey or to specific pollen types concentrated in certain honey varieties. Anyone with known bee product allergies should not use honey or propolis. Additionally, honey should never be given to children under 12 months due to risk of infant botulism. For people with type 1 diabetes or poorly controlled type 2 diabetes, HbA1c above 8%, honey should only be introduced under medical supervision with careful glucometer monitoring. These precautions are not reasons to avoid honey categorically, but reasons to introduce it carefully, test individual response, and maintain open communication with healthcare providers about dietary changes.